All right, hey guys, I'm here again with Mr. Mike Monday, and Mike, I wanted us to just jump on camera here because we were just talking about how important kick design is to making it as a pro music producer these days, and you were telling me about a funny story that you got a funny story about an email you got recently, right, from
Yeah,
a guy who was asking about kick design. So why don't you tell me about that?
yeah. I think he was getting me confused with someone else. Put it that way, because he said, "Have you uploaded the Kick Design class, or I'm happy to pay for it if it's not included." And I wrote back to him and I said, "I think you may have me confused with somebody else, because for one thing, I have never in my life designed a kick, and uh, secondly, it's one of the things that you unless it's something that lights you up and that motivates you and excites you and that you love to do, so that's the qualifier, very important one. Unless it's that, you want to specifically avoid that kind of thing.
Yeah, which
Um,
is completely counter to what most producers these days kind of think about, right? Like I know in the music production circles I'm in, a lot of people will talk about these different producers who have just this incredible ability to design this awesome kick. And it's like, yeah, the way he makes it work, just like it makes that thump happen is just amazing. And you can it's easy to kind of fall into that mindset of, well, if I'm not able to produce these awesome kick drums, I'm never going to be able to make it, right? But
mhm.
you have kind of a perception and a perspective on that mindset, right? Where you kind of talk about, people thinking about producing in terms of design and a production mindset.
Yeah. So as I said, if that's there are producers out there who do make awesome kicks, and that is a part of their process, and they're into it, right? So I'm not saying that what they're doing is wrong, but that doesn't mean that that is what you need to do in order to make your music sound amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly now, and this was true back in 1994, um, and it's true now. I mean, the only the thing closest to kick designing that I've ever done is getting my 909, my Roland 909, and fiddling with the attack and the decay and the tuning, and that is about as close to designing a kick that I've ever got.
And
Now,
you've released over 300 records,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah, and some of them. I'm not saying that all of the kicks sound unbelievably amazing, but I tell you what, it does the job. so, so, and the point being that the key to becoming the very best music producer you can be, to producing the very best music you can make, is identifying what lights you up, what you love to do, your unique thing, right? And then focusing on that almost to the exclusion of everything else. Now, for me, and for the vast majority of people I have ever spoken to, they are not naturally excited by designing kicks. It's something that they feel they have to do. And what I'm telling you, you don't. Particularly nowadays, when the quality of samples that you can get, which you can not freely use, but you can buy, or you can find, uh, the quality of kick samples is just it's defies I, I've come back to music, making music after 7 years, and I can tell you it's amazing what's out there now. And I'm not suggesting you go and buy every kick, but it's very, very quick to find a kick if you need to. I mean, I was even talking to my mix engineer the other day, who's an amazing mix engineer, and he said to me a number of times, with the quality of material, like raw material out there right now, freely available to anyone, we don't need to do as much as mix engineers. Tell
hmm.
you where that, but when you're talking about if you have to design a kit, that's a whole thing.
Yeah,
You don't have
yeah,
to do it if you don't want to.
yeah. And what's interesting is that just what you're talking about there, where people tend to want to learn about how to do kick design. They want to learn about how to do mixing and mastering. They want to learn about synthesis because they want to be able to do all of these things, and they consume all of this information trying to become the best technical producer they can. And like as we've talked about, like that's not what makes you a good music producer, right?
No,
Like there's almost the I won't say it's an either or, but it's two sides of a fulcrum where it's kind of, people tend to be consumers when in fact you tell people that, like, hey, no, what you need to do is you need to create, right?
yeah, I mean the imperfect analogy, but the analogy I would use is, do you think the greatest drummer in the world has built his own drums? No, he's learned how to use them by using
Yeah,
them, by practicing using them.
yeah.
That's how I view this, that this obsession with that kind of thing. Again, there are some drummers out there who that is part of their thing. Yes, they design their own drum kit and they build their own drum kit because they do something that they're into that, right? But that
Hmm.
is their unique thing. If that isn't your thing, if you're like, oh, I've got to, no, because there is a literally unlimited number of things that you could spend your limited time and energy doing. And the time that you spend designing kicks
Hmm.
is necessarily, and the time and energy and the effort you spend designing kicks is necessarily not spent learning how to use them. So,
Hmm.
and you don't have to.
Yeah. So when we were kind of talking in the past about this creator versus consumer, and how like all of the top producers, like they spend very little time consuming how to produce music, consuming information on how to produce music, and they tend to spend more time on creating music. And it's from creating music that they've managed to develop their own unique sound, and they've gotten to that pro level, right? Um, and as we've talked about that, you said there's kind of two mindsets. The first is kind of the practice versus production mindset, where people tend to think, oh yeah, I need to be able to produce something to a higher level of quality, or production is all about making every track perfect, whereas you talk about, actually, no, it's about practicing consistently over time, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, the music technology encourages us to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is music technology in the end for? Right? If you think about music before recording technology came along, you performed music. It was performed in a moment, and the only people that heard it were in your vicinity, and then that performance was gone. That means that you have a very particular relationship to your music. It means that your performances are simply another stage in your journey, and each performance that you do, you think, oh well, I made mistakes there, and then you go and practice so that the next performance you get better. Now, when recording technology comes along, what does that do? No longer are your performances here today and gone tomorrow, yeah, and only exist in the minds of the people who were there. You have something that exists forever, right? Essentially forever, anyway. So what does that do? The performer's like, oh no, I need music technologists. I need you to make things to be able to fix my mistakes. Yeah, and you start to get really, really focused on the existing thing. Now, that's not wrong, right? I love producing. I love doing things in a DAW. I've spent 17 years of my life doing it, and I've started doing it again now. But what it encourages is a certain relationship to your music, which means that you are constantly only thinking about the result. Now, I was lucky enough to learn instruments to be essentially forced by my mum, which I'm eternally grateful to her for, to be honest, now, but forced by my mum from the age of 7 to practice the piano. And that practice mindset, it's the opposite. You're not focused. While the performances are important, they are simply a way of measuring how your practice is going. Can you see the difference there? Right? It's like you're focused on the process, and the result is simply an indication of how the process is going.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whereas
Yeah.
in the production mindset, you are focused simply on the result. And
Yeah.
that encourages, certainly for people who haven't been brought up in a practice mindset, encourages you to just be thinking about fixing your mistakes, not about, okay, so how do I
Yeah.
actually
And that
make,
must be
yeah,
killer for people. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and what it ends up doing is like, well, if I have the perfect kick, if I can design the perfect kick, then that will mean that my music is better. When actually, what might be a better use of your time particularly if kick design doesn't light you up, what might be a better use of your time is produce more music, because
Yeah.
then you're actually practicing the process that will naturally make your music better.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what I hear from a lot of people, a lot of us, producers, is especially like they all say they suffer from perfectionism, right? And the music is never, it's never good enough, because it doesn't sound like what they have in their head, and they think that maybe I could produce it to this level, which is completely counter to what you're talking about, which is just engage in the process, in the process, right? And understand that you are always going to be a work in progress. You're never going to be perfect, but that if you consistently practice over time, like there's no, like your quality level is just going to
So
increase, right?
yeah, when you are a performer, yeah, you perform in a moment. So you have to do a performance, right? What I would suggest a and from that performance you gain a kind of feedback, and you're like, okay, so that went well here and that went badly here. In terms of finishing a piece of music, unless you finish something, you don't, that's like your kind of your performances along the way, right? And it's not about making that, I mean, to make, obviously you make that performance as good as you can, right? But the way that you learn what to improve next is by actually doing a performance, finishing a tune. In fact, even more than that, I would say, I mean, obviously the analogy, all analogies are imperfect, otherwise it would be the same thing. But the way I would describe it is that each like each piece of music you finish isn't even a performance, it's a practice session. Almost, that's closer to what it is in reality. So it's not that you don't want to do your best. Of course we all want to do our best, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about perfectionism, right? So what you want to do is you want to think of each finished piece of music as a practice session. You're practicing
Yeah.
the producing of making music, and that means it doesn't need to be perfect. In fact, you will learn more from the things that you didn't do well, which you can use going forward. Okay, so here's where I need to improve. There's where I need to improve. From a
Yeah.
finished piece of music than you will from anything else.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is what we've been talking about recently as well, which is like how to get to a point where you're happy with what's coming out of your DAW, out of your speakers, right? Because you've been guiding me on getting my production level up. And the first thing that I wanted to do when I was starting out was like, hey, let me learn about synthesis and let me learn about this, because I want to be able to learn how to craft these awesome sounds, because I can't use the defaults, because everyone will discover that I know, and realize I'm not a real music producer because I didn't carefully craft and design everything in the track. And you said, like, hell with that. Don't take a design mindset, take a discovery mindset, right? Like you mess around, have a lot of fun, get creative, try different things, but pay attention to what's coming out of the speakers, because often the best music out there wasn't designed, it was discovered, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the actual, so the difference between the design mindset and the discovery mindset in the actual production of music is that we often have this idea in our head of how we want the music to sound. Now, in order, everybody is in a sense right? In order to be able to have an exact idea in your head of how you want it to sound and then have it come out of the speakers, you probably would need to be an expert kick designer, sound designer, all of these other things, which would take you literally many lifetimes to get to the point where you were able to do that. So what I suggest is, instead of waiting for that, what you do is that you create something, and then out of the stuff that is coming out of the speakers, you get your ideas. So you actually you use the idea in your head, right, as a starting point, yeah, and you try and create that. And in the process of attempting to create that, you listen. You listen to what's coming out of the speakers, because if you're listening, this is one of the things that I noticed in my own music, was if I was obsessed with something that I had in my head and I was trying to achieve it, I would often, more often than not, in fact, kid myself that I had achieved it. And so I'd be all excited about it in the moment. And then the next day I'd come back to it and I'd be like, this sounds terrible. What was I thinking? What I was thinking was I was focusing on the sound in my head, not what was coming out of the speakers. So when you make that shift to actually listening to what is going on, not obsessing about what's going on in your head. Yes, you have to have ideas in your head that don't exist yet, of course. But that is simply a starting point which you move towards. And in the course of moving towards it, you're listening for opportunities, you're listening for things you can discover in what is happening that you didn't expect, that you weren't actually looking for. And you're like, oh wow, that's amazing. So then you take that, and then again you're like, okay, so that gives me another idea. So again, you're back into the idea in your head, and then you try and create that, listening to what's coming out. And again, you're back in the speakers again, and you discover something else. And it's that. So a design mindset is part of the process, but only a part. It isn't it. We discover our music as much as we design it. It's that interplay between the two that's so important. And what I would suggest is that the music production complex, industrial complex, right, is very, very heavily weighted. It's overemphasizing the design mindset and we like, that's why so many of the things that I suggest people do emphasizes the discovery mindset, because we need to kind of get things back into balance. I mean, one of the biggest problems I hear, and you can hear it in people's music, is that it sounds like it was made in a DAW. And that is an indication that somebody is using a design mindset and thinking that their music sounds like it does in their head, when it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the pieces of feedback that I hear consistently inside, in the community, is like, great, but like, this sounds like it came out of a DAW, right? It sounds like someone has been sitting down in front of Ableton or Logic or whatever, and they're just piecing it together. And that's like the best music that you hear from the pros doesn't have that effect, right? Like
it puts you into another place. It puts you somewhere else. It doesn't put you in front of a DAW. It puts you into, I don't know, like into a club, or into I don't know. It puts you or into an emotional state. It doesn't. It's like the technicalities of it aren't there. It's a piece of music. It's not a designed, obviously designed thing. And that often will come about. I mean, it's almost like you can hear the inexperience in that sense. It's instant. And when people say, "Oh, I need to get that pro sound," it doesn't sound pro. So therefore, I need to go and learn kick design, or I need to go and learn this, and I need to go and learn the other. I'm like, well, hang on a minute. Is that actually what you want to do? Does it light you up? No, it's what I feel I have to do. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with any of these activities. But like, so for instance, when you came, into the mastermind, and you said, I want to learn about sound, synthesis. And I said, hang on a minute. It's not that I'm anti learning about synthesis, but we hadn't yet discovered what your thing was. And it turned out in the end, that wasn't your thing at all. Your thing was something else entirely. So, and whenever you zero in on your thing, instantly your music sounds as good as anyone's. And when you start focusing on not your thing, instantly it doesn't.
Yeah. Awesome, Mike. That's great. So for anyone that's watching this video and wants to see what it takes to be kind of a pro music producer in 2019 and to find their thing, what you have a call coming up, I believe.
Yeah, I'm doing a brainstorming session on a call. It's an audio call, and where we can have a conversation, and we can have a conversation, and we can figure out what your biggest opportunities are for breaking through as a music producer in 2019. There's a group of us meeting soon. So if you click the link below, it will take you to a page, and you just put in your details, and I'll send you all the info.
Awesome. Cheers. Yeah, I'll make sure that we put the link somewhere below this video or on the page. So have a look for that, guys. Click and you should be able to register for it. So awesome, Mike. This is great. Looking forward to chat soon.
Cheers.